And she called me yesterday, and she sounded horrible, and I was like, gosh, you sound horrible, what's wrong? And she said, I got to ask you something, I've got to speak tonight. And I was like, where are you speaking? She said at Primary Purpose. I was like, it's Wednesday. Anyway, so she was obviously very sick yesterday, and I called her today to say, hey, I'm Tayloe, I'm an alcoholic, okay? Anyhow, so I called her today, and I was like, hey, Cynthia, how you doing? And she'd gotten some medicine, and was truly feeling like she was going to be able to come tonight. She wanted to make sure everybody knew how much she wanted to be here, anyhow, but she called back about 5 o'clock and just didn't sound any better and said she just wasn't going to be able to make it. So I'm here for her, which, I guess it's better when you don't have much time to think about it. And I was telling my husband, Macon, last time I spoke, I really had a weird feeling afterwards. Well, I couldn't remember my story when I was still standing up behind the podium. That's pretty bad. So hopefully I'll do a little bit better job of remembering tonight. So as Brad said, I'm a member of the Primary Purpose Group, and excited about the Correctional Facilities Conference coming up this weekend. I have a ton of other things that I have to do, including working, so I'm not going to be able to make it, but glad y'all made our meeting, and glad that we get to have that in Southern Pines. My sobriety date is January 13th, 2006, and I'm very, very grateful to be in recovery and to be able to be up here tonight. Still amazes me, I'd say, on a daily basis that I get to have the life that I get to have today, and we're grateful to all of y'all and to AA and the God of my understanding for giving me the life that I have today. I had my first cigarette at 10, my first drink at 10. Pretty much anything that I wasn't supposed to do sounded like a good idea to me. Stealing cigarettes from my dad, my grandmother, stealing money out of my grandmother's wallet. So I would just came out a little bit distorted, I guess. And my sister was the exact opposite. So she really shined in her glory, and I really tarnished up my side of the street. When I was younger, I don't really know where all that came from. I did. My mom left when we were real young, and was raised by my grandmother and my dad, and we had a maid that lived on the property that took care of us, that drove us to school, and we had horses, and she was around pretty much all the time. Whatever. I ended up getting in trouble for stuff that I didn't do, and I don't know if it was a self-fulfilling prophecy that after that, if I was going to get in trouble for stuff that I didn't do, that I just, decided I was going to do stuff. Not really sure how that worked out, but certainly ended up getting in plenty of trouble during my life. I guess probably we moved up here when I was 12, and by the time I was 14, my dad was very gullible, I guess, and maybe didn't know any better. He was doing the best he could, but, he would give me beer money to go buy beer. I'd get my friends that were, I think the age was 19 there for a couple of years, to go buy beer, and we'd have these huge parties at this lake across the street from my house. When I was 14, 15, anyhow, yeah, so it was a pretty good adventure. He liked the fact that at least he knew where we were. So it wasn't like I had to ever hide the fact that I was drinking from my dad. It was okay with him. He'd rather know what I was doing. And anyhow, I guess by the time I was 16, kind of the big party scene wasn't as attractive anymore. I'd rather be with a few friends. My friends were typically older than I was. I wanted to be with the older crowd. I wanted to be with the cool people. Anyhow, that's, I guess, how I wanted to identify myself. Very grateful that my dad made me stay in the private school when I kept on telling him every year that I wanted to go to the public school because it was a very small school, and at least they kept me accountable there. I did almost not be allowed to graduate from my senior year because I missed the baccalaureate thing and like 13 days or whatever, which I think 14 was maybe the max. But anyhow, grateful that he did have some control over what I was doing. Just to let you know, I did have my first 2 years of recovery in the other fellowship. So drugs played just as big a role in my life as alcohol did. Alcohol was like my gateway drug or whatever. And it was the one thing that really kept me from getting sober as my life went on, even though it wasn't the main influence in my life. I'll tell you a little bit more about that as we go. So when I drank, I always drank for effect. I wasn't ever really a shy person, but when I drank, it was just everything was easier. It was easier to cut up. I felt like I was funnier. I can remember being at the beach and drinking and driving, obviously, because I had good buzz going, and being on some side road and plowing through all these. It must have been trash day or something. It was dark, but plowing through these big trash cans with my car. Like every few houses or so, and they, all explode and go up in the air or whatever. And I just thought that was the greatest. So. Lucky I didn't ever get arrested, get a DUI, but probably surely deserved one. Also remember one night getting pulled over by CCNC. I was about 16 and I had on my dad's big camel hair trench coat and had just spilled a beer all in my lap right before I got pulled. And I remember rolling down the window and the police came to the window and he said, it smells like a brewery in there. But there again, back then things were a little bit simpler. He did not have me get out of the car, and I did not get a DUI. And one other time I had to take a field sobriety test or whatever, where you walk the line and all that kind of stuff. But I was lucky enough to pass that night too. So in high school, every weekend, partying every weekend. I wasn't too interested in schoolwork. I was interested in boys and friends and everything else. And initially went to college at Boone, which was a great party school. And that didn't work out too well, so I came back and went to Sandhills for a little bit and then went to ECU, which was another great party school. But I was an art major, so I had a legitimate reason for being there. But anyway, I wasn't really good about going to class. So just to tell you a little bit more about my college experience, I did end up finishing my bachelor's degree and getting a master's degree since I've been in recovery. But I had been to 6 schools before I ever went back to school since when I was in recovery. So I was really good at starting things and not finishing them. Let's see, when I was... So I had always had like a straight boyfriend and then friends that I partied with. And sometime when I was back from school, probably when I was going to Sandhills or something, that changed in my life. And I met this man that lived in Robbins, of all places. And anyhow, so he was the first person that I dated that partied. And as a result, my life just kind of took a whole, it was already doing the 180, but it did the whole 360, and I was on the total wrong direction, heading the wrong way down the road. I ended up going to prison and criminal charges connected with him with stuff that happened downtown here. I was only 22 years old. Had my name on the front page of the Pilot. My dad had the same name as I did, and it was a misprint. It said Mr. Tayloe Compton instead of Miss Tayloe Compton, so that didn't go over real well. Anyhow, so I went to treatment here when I was 21 at Pinehurst Treatment Center. I had a grand mal seizure. Didn't realize how much that actually takes out of you. This was when I was in Robbins on one of the weekends or whatever. Slept for 12 hours and then decided to drive home. And I totaled my car coming home on 22 that night and ran off the road and hit some pine trees because I had fallen asleep. And an ambulance without the lights on was like the next car to come by, and the guy happened to be somebody that I knew, and he took me home, and my car stayed there, obviously, because it couldn't drive. And the next morning, my dad came in and, said, "Where's your car?" And I totally went into tears, and, "Daddy, I need help." And I did want help. I didn't want to live like that anymore. Went to Pinehurst Treatment Center. I was the patient rep my third week. I had it going on, Thought I knew exactly what this recovery thing was about. And I did do the 90 meetings in 90 days, but then I graduated, so I was done, and life had kind of come back and gotten put back together, so I didn't need to do this anymore. Continuing on, so I'd have a couple good years, and then, but never maintained any period of sobriety. The longest time that I had before I actually got in recovery this last time was 10 months. And I never got a sponsor. I never did the steps. Well, I figured I read them, and it kind of looks like you could do them as you're reading them. If you didn't know that there's supposed to be a sponsor involved in the process. Somebody probably told me that before I got here the last time, but it never registered that I might need to do that. So I was one of the people that said that 12-step recovery AA did not work for me. So I'm trying to think what led up to the second treatment was at Davidson Alcohol Care, and got out. So when I was there, I remember this lady, and I've got some people that I know from Detox here tonight, but I'll tell the people at Detox, I don't know if I told this group, but one of the things that I remember when I went to treatment the second time was that there was a lady there, and she said, "If you get on your knees and you ask God for help and you're sincere in your heart, you'll get it." Well, I totally heard what she said, but never did it cross my mind that I might need to try that. So I am grateful that that did stick with me, and the fourth time I went to treatment, I did do that, and it changed my life. So I like to tell people that if you're struggling tonight, I don't know if you've tried that, but it was very, very helpful for me. So got out of treatment the second time and ended up back in a similar situation. Moved to the mountains to do the geographical cure. The problem was that I went with myself. I did have some successful years. I had a photography business. I waitressed for about 18 years, but I waitressed in nice places where you had to have a waitressing resume. I lived on some islands you could only get to by boat. Lived places I wouldn't have been able to live otherwise. So my life wasn't total misery, but there'd always get to the point where it was total misery, and then I'd go back to treatment. I think I also had the idea that if I just found the right guy, that my life would change and I'd be able to straighten up. And I did have a couple of really nice relationships during the times that I was doing better, I want to say, where things were kind of controlled or looked controlled. But inevitably, I would sabotage things. It was like self-sabotage. That I would destroy all the good things in my life. And so treatment number 3, because AA didn't work and 12-step didn't work, my boyfriend is the breakup president, offered to pay for me to go to treatment. And he said I could go anywhere in the country I wanted. And so I went to Oklahoma to a program called Narcanon that was non-12-step based. It was totally different. It's kind of based on Scientology, and we did these drills there. But I have to say, in its own way, I learned my own set of skills there, and I'm grateful that I had the experience. But there again, I did not follow the directions. I did not do what they said to do afterwards. There was this cute guy from Britain there, and he was getting out a month before me, and he was going back to Florida and going to get a divorce. So that was going to clear the path for me. And so we had decided that I was going to move down to Florida with him sometime after getting out. And I did that probably about 3 months after getting out. And I think I had probably 6 or 7 books from the treatment center that I had all these good intentions that I was actually going to read them. They had actually asked me to stay there and work to be part of the staff, which my life would have had a completely different path, but I didn't want to do that because I wanted to do what I wanted to do, and I want to do it now, type of thing. Anyhow, so moved down to Florida with him, and got a job with a photographer, was working with models, doing well, and the lady had a broken arm, and the other substance, that was one of them that I was interested in, was the pill she was taking. So that led me back, and then like if I could have one of those, then I could have a beer. And then the guy that I was dating relapsed heavily or whatever, and when I would look and see him really messed up, I was jealous. So, you know, if you can't knock him or can't beat him, join him type of thing. So I left Florida in another crisis, and came back, and things didn't really recover after that relapse. The last 7 years of my active addiction, my life took a whole new turn, and today I can say that I'm grateful that it did, but I was really in for a surprise of living a whole different life than I had lived before. Yeah, I had a photography business in this town, and I had an art show and had done all kinds of stuff. My mom lived there. I ended up homeless in the same town, even where she lived, because I wanted to do what I wanted to do, and if I lived with her, I couldn't do what I wanted to do. Some of y'all have heard or whatever, but I stayed in a Christmas tree field. I couldn't tell you if it was spring or fall, but it was cold at night. I had my stuff piled up in one of the buildings where they had some supplies and had stuff all stacked on top of it. I would build a little fire in the evening, and you know, the fire would go out. You have to wake up every 2 or 3 hours because you're cold and put some more wood on the fire. I was doing a little bit of like yard work for people here and there. These are people that were living like I was living, so that I could keep living like I was living. You know, might steal Pop-Tarts from the store to eat or whatever. As long as I had some money for cigarettes and something to drink, I was good. You know, that's where life had come for me at that time, and I didn't see any way to change it. At that point, I had totally become hopeless. I thought that I was a broken human being and that there was no fixing me, because I had already been to treatment 3 times. I had tried that 12-step thing. I tried it the other way. And even though I did sincerely want to get clean and sober at those times, I couldn't do it. So there was just something wrong with me. I was a broken person, like defective. I felt unworthy of love, unworthy of trust, unworthy of good things. And the way that I was living my life proved all those things on a daily basis to me. Didn't have any more relationships with healthy people. When I was healthier, I'd have relationships with healthy people, and when I wasn't, the people were just like me. And I ended up getting pregnant. It was during the time when I was in the Christmas tree field. This friend of mine, you know, that had the car and all that or whatever, had a place to live that was about 30 minutes from where I was, and he said, you're going to come down here and live. He didn't want me living in the Christmas tree field being pregnant, and so I went to stay there. I knew that I did not need to have a baby and bring a baby into my life, but I was not together enough to keep that from happening in the first place, or whatever. I probably would have chosen another path, but I wasn't together enough for that. My child was taken from me at the hospital by Department of Social Services. Being the hopeless state of person that I was, hopelessly addicted to alcohol and drugs at that time, I did not ever try to get him back. I fought against his father for for neither one of us to have him in court. As it turned out, his foster parents adopted him, and God provided for him what I could not, a healthy 2-person family. I'm fortunate to know today where he is and that he is okay. Got pregnant again after that, and I had my daughter, and lots of y'all know my daughter Summer. Same circumstances. She was taken from me at the hospital. So this is where my addiction took me, and I seriously couldn't stop. I hated myself for being pregnant and being under the influence, but I could not do it. So she was in foster care for 5.5 months when I finally got to detox the last time. I had a bag packed in my closet for 2 months, and kept on calling the treatment center like once a week or whatever, but I could never get it together to get to the treatment center. Finally, like I said, got to detox. She was 5.5 months pregnant, and something was different this time. I felt different. I knew I was going to die. So the father of my son had overdosed and died the week before I went to detox, and I finally knew that I was going to die too. Everybody that I knew was getting arrested or dying, and I was going to be one of those people. So I guess things like that were happening all along, but for the first time, like, God opened up my heart, and I was able to see the truth of my life and what was actually going on. And went to detox for 2 weeks. I went to treatment for 2 weeks, to a state facility. Like, I had been to some very nice treatment centers before, but the state facility, the 2-week state facility, was the magic for me. That's where I heard exactly what I needed to hear, because when the student's ready, the teacher appears. Like, I was finally ready and able to hear what everybody said in a whole new way. And when I heard the people in AA, I heard everything in a new way. Like, I was hearing it for the first time. The simple statements that were always kind of irritating to me, easy does it, keep it simple, all that. Was kind of finally getting those to a new level. So I was, got in contact with social services, let them know I was there. Was recommended to go to a halfway house when I got out, but I did not. I went back to my friend's place, the same place I was living. I was 10 miles out of town, up a dirt road that nobody could drive up because my driveway was so bad and I couldn't afford to get it fixed. I did not have a phone. I did not have a car. I did not have a job. And I did have a desire to stay clean and sober like I had never had before, and I had God in my life. And I was willing to go to any lengths to stay sober. So I remember going to my first meeting, and afterwards, finally, I was ready for the sponsor, asking if anybody there could be my sponsor, and I got a sponsor, and she'd give me rides to and from meetings. Everybody knew I didn't have a car, so I had to ask for help for the first time, which I really wasn't very good about. People gave me transportation. I paid one of the neighbors like $17 a month to be able to use his phone to call my sponsor every day. I had to walk like a quarter mile to use the phone to call her. My path needed to be a little bit harder than some people's because I was so hard-headed. Like, I needed to work a little bit harder at this because I worked really hard at staying out of recovery. And anyhow, so then after one of the meetings, we were all, sitting around doing the fellowship afterwards, and I was talking about looking for a job and that I can work hard as any man can. And one of the guys in the meeting gave me a job with him installing carpet and tile, and he was willing to come get me 10 miles out of town and, bring me home or whatever. So everything happened for me in recovery. All of my support people were in recovery, and The neighbors above me, where I lived in a trailer, and the neighbors above me were kind of all in the same stuff that I was in, and the neighbors below me were more in the houses or whatever, but they had tried to save me for a couple of years, and it took me to this little church in my neighborhood a couple times, and my neighbor directly below, he was on the board of directors of a nonprofit place, and he got me helping out in their food pantry, volunteering, and that volunteering actually turned into a job as volunteer coordinator for me, and at a place where I had been a client before, which was a pretty cool turnaround. So I worked there for the 2 years I was in recovery before I moved here. My stepmother got in a bad riding accident, and my dad was 80, and we couldn't think about how dad was going to be living by himself. He had dementia. So I came for her funeral and went back and quit my job and moved over here 2 weeks later. I had an opportunity to do a living amends with my father, and he never really understood about recovery, what AA was. He knew I was going to these meetings, but I think he thought I was like directing a meeting or something. He never knew how bad things were, because when it was really bad, I did not see my dad or talk to my sister or anything for 10 years. When my life was really bad, I totally isolated from my family. So they never knew what it was like, which I'm grateful. And when I start talking about it, sometimes my sister will be like, too much information. But anyway, so yeah, living with my dad, my daughter, I got custody back of her there when I was living in the mountains. She was 1 year and 3 months old. I was having her for weekends. I was supposed to have her for weekends till she was 18 months, and then so I'd had her for like a couple weekends, and then they gave me full custody, and I had never babysat babies or knew what to do with babies, and then I didn't know what to do with this baby, and I had a baby. So the people in recovery helped me raise my baby. I didn't know what to feed her. I totally needed directions for living life, and the people in 12-step recovery showed me how to live my life. Moving back here, I went to some of the meetings of the other fellowship and didn't really see what I wanted. And this is probably about the fourth meeting I came to. It was downstairs in the basement below here somewhere. It was the first place that I was like, there's got to be somebody that I knew from before that's here in recovery. And Brad was here as for one of the people, and then Tyner, which he's not really here much anymore, but there was a few people that I knew here, and I felt at home here. And so I thought, this is going to be my place, and this has been my home group since then. So I guess it's been about 11 years. And I love this group. It has saved my life, and it has given me directions for life. Through doing these service positions, the treasurer, I didn't know how to balance checkbooks. Steve directed me how to balance a checkbook so you can learn how to manage money here. And being on the programs committee with Brad got me in co-chairing that at first, and then the GSR, learning how to conduct a business meeting. These gave me some professional skills, and then I decided it'd be a good thing to go back to school. So started out at Sandhills to be a substance abuse counselor, and I told my advisor of all my 6 previous colleges that I had almost a couple of years added up out of 6. So she said you ought to get a 4-year degree and get a social work degree, and I did that. And then the opportunity came up to get a master's, and never thought I would commit myself to more school, but I did. And so I got my master's in 2014, and worked in outpatient therapy for 3 years in community mental health and substance abuse, which that is an adventure. But the people were just like me. I'd been a client there too. And now I work at detox at the hospital where I went to treatment. So I have done a full circle in my life. And my daughter is 13, and she has been raised in the rooms. She knows that she's allergic to alcohol, and sometimes I cannot believe that she is my child, because she is really sweet and she is really innocent. She still likes to sleep with the stuffed animals. And by the time I was 13, I was really heading for some deep trouble, When I remember when she was 10 and thinking, I was already smoking a cigarette and taking a drink. There's just no way. And I think back now how bizarre that is when I look at kids 10 years old and think about what I was into. But I'm so glad that she's not. So I have a sponsor. I sponsor women. As it turns out, my sponsor is the lady who was my counselor at Pinehurst Treatment Center 30 years ago, so I've done a full circle with her. One of the girls that I sponsor, probably was about 6 years ago, you know, been in and out of the Bethany house. So I did go there and only stayed 3 weeks after my second time in treatment, so I did that wrong too. But so I like working with the women at the Bethany house and being around that environment. And I went in there one of the afternoons, and a girl said Tayloe, and we were standing in the kitchen, and I looked over at her, and like the voice sounded familiar, and I looked at her. She had been burned though, and I thought, gosh, that voice sounds familiar, and the eyes look really familiar, but I could not place her. And she's like, it's Michelle. And I was like, from college? And she's like, no, for prison. But as it turns out, this girl that was like my friend in prison that we walked together every day, she was there at the Bethany house, and I've had the joy of sponsoring her since that time. I mean, those are the miracles that God has put into my life. Let's see. So my other cool thing is that because I always thought the right man was going to fix me, I spent a lot of years alone and not in a relationship in recovery. It was the best thing for me. I'd say I pretty much didn't date at all for almost 9 years. And then some people talked me into doing the online dating thing, and I was doing that a little bit, and you know, like somebody came and stayed for 24 hours, and I thought, I cannot do that. If somebody's from out of town, they want to come, they want to spend 24 hours at my house, that is too much of one person. So I decided that wasn't going to work, and then come to find out, this person that was in my home group, we went out to dinner one night or whatever, and hit it off, and we got married October 20th, and had a bunch of people at recovery at our wedding. We had 200 people and no alcohol, and they all had a great time. So that's a pretty cool experience. All I can say is, like, my life is awesome today. So I have to work on Saturday. So today I had the day off, and I went and rode 2 horses this morning. Hung out with my mom a little bit. My sister had some foot surgery, so I have a normal life these days. Not normal. It's excellent. All the gift of recovery. That's all I have. Thank you.